Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus, and today we're talking about the subject of dealing with skeptical friends or family members. And this can put a lot of strain on relationships in particular because it can create this element of disrespect. And I've seen it cause problems, especially, unfortunately, with wives and their husbands. There tends to be a kind of a trend that it's the husbands or the men who develop this pathological skepticism or left brain imbalances, which I may talk about more in this video. And usually it's the wife who is more open to supernatural ideas and things that we talk about on this channel. And this is kind of a cliche, I suppose, but I think that there is a biological component between sometimes right brain, right hemisphere imbalances, which leads to things like joining cults or getting horribly ripped off, buying a crystal to cure a disease that does nothing, and a left brain imbalance where suddenly you cannot believe anything unless you're able to test it in a laboratory or see it with your own eyes. And even then, it's questionable if you'll still believe something. So it's kind of this extreme logic that actually goes so far, it does it goes full circle and actually turns into illogical behavior. And both of these imbalances are a big problem. Not only if you have an imbalance like this, but if you have a friend or family member who is imbalanced in this way. So I have a couple of ideas that may help in situations like these. So before we get started, you are watching Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, where we look critically, objectively at these areas of information, hopefully using an objective lens that's in the middle and it's not right brain imbalance where I just spout out new agey stuff and then you're supposed to believe anything I say, or left brain imbalance where I'm caught in a rat maze of continually questioning, is it real, is it real, is it real, and then getting nowhere. Just so I think maybe a hamster wheel is a better analogy of just spinning that hamster wheel all day long and not making any progress because I can't get out of wondering if something which has been demonstrated and experienced on numerous occasions, whether it's objective reality or not. So both of these imbalances, to me, they don't get you anywhere. And so this channel takes that middle path. So if you like this stuff, please hit the subscribe button. Check to make sure you're still subscribed because YouTube unsubscribes people from this channel. It's why the channel takes so long to grow. And many people ask me, hey Cyrus, how come I was unsubbed from your channel? I used to get your videos in my feed. This is part of this YouTube big tech censorship thought war that is still happening, even on tiny channels like this one. And I think they have like algorithms and formulas and things that if there's any kind of idea that they don't want to percolate into society, then they have little measures to keep that idea pushed to the bottom, and it's unfortunate that they do this, but that's just the fight we all have to do. Okay, so to continue, if you want to support this work as well, head to patreon.com/afterlife topics. If you join at the $30 level, I will work with you for unlimited coaching. That is like astral projection help, out-of-body experience help. You having experiences you can't explain, I can shed some light on them or provide information from my own knowledge banks about multidimensional topics. So feel free to sign up if you want to support my work and also communicate with me, work with me for this, for also expanding this channel as well. All right, that said, so I had a debate with this Tom Jump guy a few days ago, and you can find that debate on the Seeking Eye channel hosted by Darren Mack. I would recommend checking the channel out. And this was like the almost extreme cliche example of somebody with pathological left brain imbalance. So someone like this, they will not accept anything as reality unless it's either, again, something that they can physically see, touch, taste, or if a high-level authoritarian institution says it's real. And even then, when dealing with topics that are non-material in nature, there's a huge amount of like built-in bias against it being a valid subject, no matter how much evidence you produce. So I think that this is just as much an ideological movement of, like, whatever you want to call it, atheism, materialism, as it is like this kind of left brain imbalance issue. So just like with the right brain imbalanced people who join cults, oftentimes a psychological or even neurological issue gets married to a movement or other people with corresponding ideas like this. And the left brain dominant stuff tends to be the powers that be, that tends to have a lot of sway. It's kind of is the academic scientific institution. And some people get really sucked into that. And why it is so is, such a fallacy to view reality this way is because objective reality doesn't care what earthly human scientific establishment thinks. Scientific establishment has historically been wrong throughout the ages. I mean, people with this extreme left brain dominant thinking back in 1700s, even 1800s, would have thought you were crazy for saying that there's tiny animals that are responsible for our diseases, that there's these little tiny invisible creatures. They would have you'd be laughed out of whatever academic institution back then, because although they had primitive microscopes and they were identifying small insects, there was really no patience for ideas of like bacteria or viruses. And look what that caused. It perpetuated the Black Death. And this was the same mentality as it existed back then. And we can see example after example after example of this. So now, like that Tom Jump guy was basically arguing that paranormal things cannot exist because the current scientific establishment doesn't think they exist, which very strange argument to make. And I really brought a lot of these weird ideas to the surface because of the way my tactics for debating with him. That was my goal, was to bring out a lot of these weird biases and issues that these people have. But the other big problem is, I've noticed on the debate, and this is something I've been noticing for the 20 plus years I've been involved in this area, is how much disrespect there was. So just a condescending attitude the whole time, even implicating that people with an interest in non-materialism are akin to people who are flat earthers. And he didn't say this directly, but it was implied. And this level of disrespect and condescension is also what happens in family situations if someone is dealing with someone like this character, someone who has this kind of left brain imbalance. And then this is what rips relationships apart, because like the husband doesn't just not believe in his wife's metaphysical ideas, but the husband thinks the wife is crazy, and the wife knows that the husband thinks that she is crazy. And that's what causes serious problems between couples, but also, friends and family members, parents, and things like that. So what do you do in these situations? Well, I would recommend really hitting the significant other or the family member, the parent, whatever, with the objective evidence, kind of like I did in that debate. Present the double-blind experiments here at the University of Arizona, the University of Virginia Reincarnation Research, all of Dean Radin's work. Lots more stuff. You can pick up my first book for info about different areas like this, or check out Victor Zamet's website, victorzamet.com. There's places to compile the objective double, triple-blind experiments, the data, the hard data that they demand and that they believe doesn't exist. Like I began that debate, this guy's, there's never been any evidence in the history of the world of a single paranormal thing being real. Meanwhile, later in the interview, I was throwing studies at him that he'd obviously never even heard of. So, he wasn't even aware that there really is hard scientific data for many of these areas, because he's in a bubble, he's an ideological bubble. And then once you present that data, it kind of throws them off, because it comes in conflict with their direct narrative, with their ideological supposition. So the idea, though, isn't to have a big fight, and it's not necessarily to convince them. But what you want to do is get to a point where they respect what your interests are. Because if you can present all of those experimental data, they might not believe it. They might even have regurgitated debunker arguments against those ideas. But once they take a look at this evidence you're presenting, you're now working with them on their terms, on the left brain hemisphere. And then this will usually cause them to respect your decision to be interested in the subject. Because if you try to reason with them using right hemisphere arguments by going all woo-woo on them and saying, "Oh, let's, you have to get your vibration right because then you can manifest your reality." Blah, blah, blah. If you start talking like that, using a more right hemisphere way of thinking, then you will lose their respect even more, and you will never break through to them that way. So you have to use left hemisphere arguing, left hemisphere thinking, which is cold, hard data and facts and experiments and things like that. And then this what creates people in this field who are kind of like hybrids. Excuse me, hybrids of both being kind of left brain dominant or imbalanced and also supporting or being a proponent of these ideas. And usually these are people who are kind of gravitate toward the research into psi, research into parapsychology, macro PK, these things which are testable, which are statistically relevant fields, and then looking into the sometimes the wider implications of that. But it's rare that there are people like this, but there are. In some ways, some of the big scientific names like Stuart Hameroff comes to mind, people who propose non-materialist ideas, but they don't necessarily go out of their way to say there is an afterlife, that they're willing to take the red pill and start believing in out-of-body experiences or astral experiences or things like that. But there's somewhere in between these two polarities, and that is definitely progress, because that is where we need to go to be able to bring a lot of these subjects into the open, into the light. The scientific process is ruled by that hard left brain empiricism, but it's there for a reason, and that's something that I talked about in that debate. Is that the Enlightenment constructed this left brain beast to guard humanity from people who, for example, take false cures or take medicine from witch doctors or get ripped off or join cults, or basically the only way to have created the civilization that we're in now was there had to be this institution created. But this is how it backfires, and it's historically backfired a lot. So ultimately, that is my advice about how to break through to your significant other or somebody that you have to live with who disrespects you because of your interests, is that you have to meet them on their terms, and you have to at least get them to respect you so it doesn't cause conflict. Now, some of these people, unfortunately, I think that there's a link to narcissistic personality qualities with the power that you get from gatekeeping a area of information, to be able to say that everyone who's had a supernatural experience or met their deceased loved one or whatever it may be, that all of them are delusional. So to be able to have that power over people attracts certain narcissistic types. And if that's the case, I guess I can't do a lot to help you, because it would mean that, dealing with narcissism is a whole different subject, and dealing with narcissistic abuse or narcissistic feeding, getting power, vampirism, sucking the energy out of you, all of those can be components of some of these types of people, unfortunately. And if that's the case, again, there's not a lot that I can offer. But hopefully that's not the case, and hopefully you can just get on a level playing field with like your significant other, present that information. If it comes up, don't try to proselytize, and don't try to convince them, don't try to preach to them. Only bring this up if you're getting into fights about it, if he says something snarky or condescending about something you're doing, and then you need to sit down with them and say, look, I want to clear the air about this, because I know you think that I'm crazy for being involved in metaphysical subjects. Here's the data. Here's some stuff I printed off the internet These are empirical scientific research, for example, out of Gary Schwartz's lab or Windbridge Institute in relationship to mediums, whatever it is, wherever you get your information. And I want you to know this is why I'm interested in it. Here's the science behind it. And I think that would do a lot to get the respect again in the relationship, because to some of these people it's like they can't even process this stuff unless it's information that is something that they can feel, touch, experience, or is approved of by an authoritative source. They can't even relate to anything existing in reality. So this is what happens with too much, left brain dominance. You can't think in an expansive way, or sometimes even thinking in a creative way becomes difficult. You can only experience the world around you that's directly around you. And so when we're dealing with the subjects of like multi-dimensions, the multiverse, it's really difficult to wrap your mind around that if you have a left brain imbalance. So I hope that advice helps. I guess that's it for this video. You can get involved at afterlifetopics.com or pick up a book of mine like Understanding Life After Death. And it's the dark times out there. Hopefully a podcast like this one will be a pleasant thing to listen to as the world just seems to get crazier all the time, and this damn pandemic seems to have no end in sight. But we can always go inward. We can expand our knowledge, expand our spiritual goals, expand our path in life and our ability to be of service to other people, and all of these types of things, which will, I think, mitigate what a lot of us are going through, especially those of us who have been directly impacted by all of this. And that's all we can do. There's no point in always watching the news, which takes bad situations and makes those situations so much worse, so that they can, to bring it back to what we were talking about, get that narcissistic, feeding from people, from the population, when there's already fear and problems, and then they make those fear and problems worse so that they can feed off of that loosh. So pretty good reasons to avoid the news lately. Anyway, I know I'm going on a tangent, but I wanted to bring that up too. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys on the next video.